Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I am your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm privileged to welcome one of the very, very tall leaders from the world of information technology from India, Dr. Ajai Chaowdhry. Ajay, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Dr. Chaowdhry is the founder of HCL. He's the chairman of the EPIC, or the Epic Foundation. He's one of the pioneers of the Indian IT industry. He's been honored with the award of Padma Bhushan, and those of you who do not know, Padma Bhushan is the second highest award in India. He's been recognized, awarded, and felicitated several times. And when I was reading about him, I was amazed and delighted to learn that he and I are both fans of the evergreen actor Devanand.
Yeah, sure.
So I've always believed the moment I see Devanand, I used to go and see him in theaters, that the moment I saw him, my ticket was, the money for my ticket had been recovered, and after that was all profit.
I know.
So Ajay, let's start talking about HCL. Let's start by asking you, what were some of your key challenges as you built HCL into a global powerhouse?
Well, I go back to 79, 80, when we first set foot on Singapore. And I think you were there at the same time, if I recall. So 79, 80, nobody had ventured out of the country, no IT company.
Correct.
And we were crazy enough to venture out into Singapore to set up a hardware company. And the EDB invited us and said, look, we are starting a very major program in electronics, and we would love to have a computer manufacturer there. So, three of us just got onto a plane, and we had very little money because those days RBI didn't allow you to take any great shake money out of India. And we just landed up there and said, let's get going. But before that, we did some bit of market research, which told us what should be the positioning of the company.
Correct.
And clearly, the positioning told us that if we went to sell computers, we won't succeed. So we changed the whole rules of the game, and we said, we only sell computerization and we don't sell computers.
Okay.
And that was our first campaign that we ran full page in Straits Times in Singapore, where we said, computers, not just computerization, not just computers.
I remember.
And we had a lot of stuff to back it up. And we set up a software factory in Madras, which was again the first in the country. And we used to actually develop software in Chennai and then ship it to Singapore through courier. And lots of times those floppies those days were there. They used to get spoiled in the customs. But never mind, we succeeded. And in the first 6 months, I think we sold $1 million worth of computerization, and which was our target. So we met our target in 6 months. But what we saw as a challenge when we were starting out is that when we went to meet customers in Singapore, their impression of an Indian was a corner shop wala. That fellow in the corner who sells kirana. And that's the way they used to think about us. The positioning was just not existing. So we had to really create positioning for India, create positioning for HCL. And that was quite a struggle in the beginning. But we overcame that and succeeded over the years in Singapore. And then we expanded to China and other countries from there. And in about 6-8 years, we had done large system integration deals out of China and other locations. So that's the way, you had to face that kind of situation in those early days.
And when you say that you had to go through a process of educating the consumer, what were some of the challenges that you saw in trying to convince people that India was on the path to becoming a major technology country?
See, those days, nobody recognized India as a technology.
Correct.
But interestingly, India at that time was ahead of Singapore. 1980 when we went. In about 10 years, Singapore went ahead of India. So we went there and said, look, guys, we are one of the largest companies out of India. And we are number one in India. We would like to be telling you what to do with technology. And that's how we succeeded over a period of time. So the positioning, the branding, all of that needed to be done. So when we went there, we said, we are not going to spare the money in hiring the best in terms of advertising and PR. So we hired O&M for advertising, and we hired Burson Mastella for PR. And that's how we really did the positioning act right up front. And then we started to meet various people in the government to tell them what we can do, how we can do, what we can do different from what others have been doing in Singapore. And that's how we went about creating our brand there.
Very interesting. So, again, when I was reading about you and I was looking at some of your articles, it's very clear that your dream has been to see India as a top electronics producer. I mean, given the fact that you started in 1980, which was probably before anyone could even think about it.
76.
76, okay.
76.
So let me start by asking you, what is needed to achieve your dream?
Well, actually, for the last 30, 40 years, I have spent a huge amount of time in convincing the Indian government that hardware is as important as software.
Correct.
What people do not know is pretty much all of software companies that started originally with hardware. And when we took HCL for setting up a manufacturing plant in the US in 89, again, we took hardware there, not software. And we got lots of orders. We failed due to certain other reasons. But that's the time when we actually made the switch from hardware to software. And why did it happen? It happened because a lot of the hardware companies in India, especially HCL, we were absolutely fantastic in terms of our operating system knowledge.
Correct.
So we had adopted Unix in India, and we had done so much work on Unix that we were far ahead of the US. And when we landed up in the US, those guys were surprised that we had done so much work on Unix. And as a matter of fact, when our hardware unit did not take off due to certain reasons, our engineers went and sat inside the R&Ds of companies like HP. And they actually have patents for some pieces of the technology, which our people created. So it all started from hardware and went off to software. TCS was also a Burroughs company.
Correct. Yeah.
Tata Burroughs. So a lot of these companies that were software, like Wipro, they were also a hardware company. Only Infosys, but Infosys also had some hardware linkage through Patni.
Correct.
Because they used to sell digital. So a lot of people don't know that everything came out of hardware and then became software. Now, if we look at going forward, what have we done wrong and what have we done right as a country?
Correct.
About 20, 25 years ago, when software really took off, the government started saying, we don't need to worry about hardware anymore. We are doing so well in software. Why should we, waste our time? But I went about convincing the government and saying, don't make that mistake, because hardware and software are two sides of the same coin.
Correct.
And you are going to not succeed unless you look at hardware. So anyway, it didn't happen. I wrote many reports for the government. I made a line which was very successfully used by every minister, which said our electronic import bill will be higher than the oil bill. And everybody used it, but they did nothing about it. So about 5 to 7 years ago, things started to change.
Correct.
And the government started listening. And slowly, we came up with policies which actually were very positive towards hardware. Now, look at the geopolitical situation today. The geopolitical situation is that you have the Ukraine war, you had COVID, and you had zero COVID policy in China.
Correct.
All these three things pointed towards the fact that you need more resilience in your supply chain. And that change is a very critical change for India to seize upon. For many years, people have talked about China plus one. Vietnam went and seized that and created a fantastic manufacturing capability in electronics. But we didn't do that. We kept talking, did nothing. Now, what the situation is that as everybody is thinking that, look, till yesterday, people went to China, they got a product designed, they got it manufactured, they brought it back to their country and labeled it as Havells or Usha or Westinghouse or whatever. And they sold it to the world. I think that opportunity exists for India today. And that's why I very strongly believe that India as a product nation is our next step. And we must seize on that opportunity. And what are our benefits? Against Vietnam, we have great design capability and engineering capability, which Vietnam does not have.
Correct.
If we put manufacturing plus design plus engineering, I think we can easily replace China in at least 10% or 20% of the product business that they do for the world.
And what is the role a big domestic market will play in India to support domestic manufacture of electronics?
Very important question, because this is something that we have been telling the government again for a while. We said, do something called demand aggregation. That is, the government is the largest buyer of IT.
Correct.
If they can do demand aggregation and give it to domestic players who design and manufacture in India, then they will have the initial leg up on volume.
Correct.
And once they have the volume, they can actually create technologies and pricing which can be sold all over the world. Now, I'll give you one example happening just now.
Right.
The government has decided to give the 4G piece of BSNL to Tata's. It's a 14,000 crore business.
Correct.
The Tata team that is working on it, I talked to them and I said, look, you guys have got a 14,000 crore business. But if you want to be successful in future, you have to compete with the Nokias and the Ericssons. And they said, that order has made it easier for us.
Wow.
Because with that order, we are able to buy components which are at the same price as Nokia and Ericsson. So that's what demand aggregation does. So we are actually proposing through EPIC that every state does demand aggregation. So for example, UP wants to buy 2 crore tablets. We are telling them that why the hell are you not looking at buying from an Indian company who designs and manufactures in your state?
Yeah.
And you do the demand aggregation, even if you get 50% of that business, 1 crore is a huge number. So that's really what we are after.
Fascinating.
Creating demand aggregation. And interestingly, government policy supports it today. So the government has a demand aggregation policy in its semiconductor policy, as well as preferential market access for India designed products and India value addition products. They don't apply it well enough.
Fascinating. So, you know, what you're saying makes so much sense, because I remember after ITC, I spent 8 years in aerospace, running Asia for 2 major American companies. And they used to survive on government orders and then be able to do a lot of other things. So what you're saying makes abundant sense. And I sincerely hope it happens.
You know, something very interesting is happening because of the large domestic market. Do you know that India is the second largest wearable? India has the second largest wearables brand in the world.
Wow. Okay.
Boat came up 5 years ago. Out of the blue. After Apple, they are number 2 in the world.
Wow.
Why? Because the India market is so huge. So you take advantage of the India market, unlike what Vietnam can do. If we design and manufacture in India for the Indian market, we have large volume, even in the consumer space, and you can succeed.
Well said. But tell me, Ajay, one is the market, one is the technology. How are we, as far as infrastructure is concerned in different states, to be able to handle a delicate product like electronics?
You hit the nail absolutely on the head. I've been telling the government for a while that our logistics is absolutely pathetic. Logistics does not support electronics.
Correct.
Electronics means very quick movement from A to B to C. You need transshipments in India. Those kind of logistics capability does not exist in India. But with the new logistics policy and the Gati Shakti that's been announced, I have great hopes that these kind of things will be taken care of. What I'm telling government is that create clusters which are beautifully connected to airports and ports. So if, let's say, UP decides to do it, they're setting up this Jewar airport. Around that, if they set up a very large electronics capability, which they are planning, then if you manufacture there, you want to import components, you want to export products, it's very quick. But they need to also work on the customs part of it, where import does not take more than half an hour. In half an hour, you clear your component, make the product, and next day it ships. That's the kind of capability you need, which Vietnam has created.
Correct.
Vietnam Haiphong port directly connects to one of the major cities in China. 12-hour trip, you can get components from there.
Wow. Wow. The other part of electronics manufacturing is the chips, the chip manufacture. And I remember, there used to be one chip manufacturing plant in Chandigarh. I think SCL or something.
Semiconductor complex.
Semiconductor complex. And then we suddenly had this complete move to China. I've now been reading that there's a lot of electronics manufactured for chips that are coming back to India. I'd love to get your perspective on that.
Well, again, I've been writing about doing semiconductors since 2009. And I saw this problem many, many years ago. Okay. And I told the government, look, watch out. If you don't do semiconductors, you won't succeed.
Correct.
Everybody in India and everybody's uncle and aunt used to come and tell the government, let's do fabless companies out of India, which will design the chips, but don't make it in India because it's too expensive. I never believed in it because I said, look, someday you will realize what happens. And we realized during COVID, when we fell short of semiconductors in India in a big way. And close to 250 companies, industries were impacted. So the impact of semiconductors is phenomenal. And the earlier Senate head for intelligence in America, Ben Sasse, he made a statement about 4 or 5 years ago, if I recall. He said, the next war will be fought with semiconductors.
Wow.
So that's the importance of semiconductors. So good news is that in the last 2 years, huge movement in India Semiconductor Mission has been set up. I am an advisor to India Semiconductor Mission. They've created a $10 billion plan to give benefits to people who come and set up in India, which is the largest in the world. So if you want to come and set up a semiconductor plant in India, you get 50% of the investment done by the government, central government. State governments are also getting so excited that some of the state governments are putting another 20%.
Wow.
So just imagine if you have a $5 billion plant you want to set up, 70%, that is 3.5 billion, will get paid for. So you will have to just spend 1.5 billion to set up. So these are the kind of benefits that are coming up now. And I think if our biggest challenge in this country has been that we make great policies, but we don't market them good enough.
Well said. Well said.
We completely miss out on marketing. And that is still a lacuna in the country.
So, Ajay, one more question related to electronics manufacturing, then I want to move to the EPIC Foundation. We are already big manufacturers of computers. We're probably, I think, one of the biggest for telephones.
Yeah.
What are some of the other major electronic sectors that India can focus on? I mean, I keep reading about electronic vehicles, for example, but I'd love to get your thoughts.
You see, mobile phones, we are the second largest manufacturer in the world. It's happened in just 3 to 4 years.
Correct.
It's a great story. But behind that story also lies a problem. We don't do any much value addition in India.
Okay.
That is something we must change. So we must design mobile phones in India and then manufacture. Then we'll have higher value addition. But let's leave that aside. The opportunity for us is in literally every part of electronics. You tell me which product doesn't have electronics. I can't name any.
Okay.
Maybe toothbrush. But that's what it's all about. So fundamentally, we need to be making electronic products. So I have given a proposal to the government recently, where I've said, let's work towards making India a product nation in electronics. And let us identify 500 products, which we want to make in India. And then put incentives around it and put strategies around it where startups and medium-sized companies, large companies can all participate and make these products in India. Amazing. If these are designed in India, then we can manufacture in India. And that's really my dream, that if we can do something like this, it will be make us extremely competitive and will be a terrific alternate source to China.
Amazing. Well said. So Ajay, now let me move to the EPIC Foundation. Tell me a little bit about this foundation and what was what was your vision to set this up?
Well, we were looking at what was happening in the last 8 to 10 years. Till 10 years ago, 15 years ago, maybe there were electronic brands in India. You had all kinds of brands in television. You had brands like Micromax and Lava in phones. You had a lot of Indian brands. Suddenly, in the last 10 to 15 years, all those brands vanished and the Chinese took over. And I started talking about it a couple of years ago, and I said, India has become a colony of China. Because fundamentally, we've opened up our whole market to the Chinese.
Correct.
And we're getting nothing in return. What are we getting? Yes, we manufacture mobile phones in India, but we don't do any value addition. So what are we really trying to do? So through EPIC, we brought together a few people, me, Arjun Malhotra, whom you know from HCL, Dr. Satya Gupta, who's a very well-known guy in the semiconductor area. You used to work for Intel. And then we set up a board, which consists of all of us, plus a gentleman who heads the Manufacturers Association of Information Technology, and Professor Karandikar from IIT Kanpur. Okay. He's again a telecom and semiconductor guy. So we said, this will be a board. And then we set up a, advisory board, which is a global advisory. And we said our objective should be that we must convert India to a product nation. And so we have started to work on ourselves investing in creating some technologies. So the first two products that we identified were a tablet for education and a chip for the LED business. Okay. So the LEDs that are made in India, there are 100 crore LEDs we make every year. And the chip that goes into it for driving the LED is single source from China. Okay. So we went to the association and we went to some of the large manufacturers like Philips and Dixon and all these guys. And he says, you guys are, importing this. During COVID times, the price went up thrice because there was single supplier. So we went to them and said, why can't we do demand aggregation? Why can't all the manufacturers join up and give us the design, give us a capability to design and manufacture it? We have been successful. Okay. So right at this moment, the design is going on for the chip. In about 3 months, the design will be done. Tape out will happen in June. And by about October, November, we should have the first lot of wafers coming out. Amazing. Wafers today can't be made in India because that capability does not exist. We wanted government to upgrade the semiconductor complex, but they did not agree. So we went to a Taiwanese company and they are giving the wafers. And they found an Indian company called Sahasra Semiconductors. They have set up a plant to package the chips. Okay. So we'll do the design and packaging in India. Wafer will come from outside. But hopefully in the next 2 to 3 years, when wafer capability happens in India, we'll have the whole thing made in India. Amazing. So that's part one of LED. That's successful. We've also launched our tablet in India. So we've designed this tablet through a design company in India and manufacturing it in India. But the differentiation we are making is that in education, when people buy tablets, they can't afford to throw them away. Because students can easily use the same tablet for 5 years. Absolutely. So we decided to make it different, and we have made it upgradable and repairable. So that people can own the product for 6 years instead of throwing it after 2 years. Because if you pick up a typical tablet, there's not even a screw at the back. You can't open. Correct. When I was also reading about you on this website, what EPIC is doing, it was fascinating to see about your R3 strategy, which was reuse, repair, and recycle. And I assumed that is because of this huge electronics waste that is likely to come out. What are your thoughts on this? We are the second largest e-waste country in the world. Okay. And it's becoming bigger and bigger problem because I talked to you about wearables and hearables. Yeah. And these products, little products, people use for 3 months and throw them away. So this is just creating a massive problem of e-waste in the country. So what we did was that, interestingly, the government, through its Consumer Affairs Ministry, they came up with this whole idea that India should also adopt a right to repair policy.
Okay.
So we went and talked to them, and we influenced them to create this policy. So they said, what should we do? We said, you tell us. They said, okay, you write a report for us, but do it pro bono. We can't afford to pay you. We said, okay, we'll write the report pro bono. So we wrote the whole report. It's about 150-page report. We've given them all the global strategies and suggested an India strategy. And we said, let's go and implement this. So right to repair policy is going to happen in India in the next 12 months. And it will create phenomenal amount of jobs, because if every product is repairable in India, then look at the number of people who can repair products all over the country. It will be in lakhs. So that's part one of the whole strategy. The part two of the strategy was, let's standardize the USB-C as a standard for all products.
Right.
So again, we participated in that. And the government has now announced a policy that by 2024 December, everybody has to have USB-C as a standard of all products.
Right.
We are now working on the next part of that strategy. I'm part of the committee for hearables and wearables, where again we want to bring USB-C as a standard.
Amazing.
So these are the kind of things you have to do to make e-waste manageable. The other interesting part that most people don't know is that there are some very interesting companies in India who are extracting lithium from e-waste.
Okay.
And India doesn't have any lithium deposits at all. But this company's technology, we can be a 10% to 20% lithium supplier to the world.
Wow.
So it's astonishing what you can do with technology.
Incredible. Thank you. So we've got time for one more question, Ajay, and this is for the thousands of people who will listen to your words of wisdom. Based on your own amazing journey, and you've achieved so much in your life, what would you say are 3 lessons or 3 learnings you want a lot of our young people to take away?
Well, I think the first learning that I would like to talk about is that people always have had this whole thinking, old thinking, that you need to be looking at only one area in life. So if you are a mechanical engineer, you look at mechanical engineering, nothing. I have a very different view. I view that you should have a range of things that you should do. And if you have that range, then you have a worldview.
Correct.
And that, I think, is very critical for success. I did that with great success within my company and within IIT Hyderabad, where I was the founder chairman. I started an entrepreneurship program in IIT Hyderabad, and it's the only IIT that has it. So range, I think, is a very important issue. The other very critical issue is that you should have certain skills which are important. And one of the life skills I believe in is salesmanship.
Sorry, is what? I didn't get that word.
Salesmanship.
Okay. Yeah.
You know, if you want to be a successful CEO of a startup, if you don't know how to sell, forget it. You'll never make it.
Well said.
So you have to have great salesman capabilities. And last but not the least is managing people at the end of the day. How well you can manage people and how you can get the best out of ordinary people. You know, a lot of people say you have to hire the most sexy guys in the world, the most intelligent guys in the world. I have a great difference from that. When I ran the hardware business, I could not afford to hire the most smartest guys in the world. I had to hire people whom I could afford because my margins were so low.
Correct.
But let me tell you one thing. Every year, in the last 10 years of my run as head of HCL Infosystems, we were #1 in employee satisfaction.
Amazing. Amazing.
And why did that happen? Because we had a deep linkage to our people. And we created these very ordinary people to be great people. And that's what delivered results. So you can get great results from the, IIT, MBA type of people. But can you get results from a diploma engineer?
Well said.
That's what we did with great success.
Well said. And on that note, Ajay, and your 3 amazing lessons, we need to change our thinking because we can do many things in life and therefore we need to get a world view. Second, you said was we need to develop skills that are important. And one of them you outlined was be a good salesperson. I think we need to be a good salesperson. And third one you said was managing people is very, very critical, and managing people who have the capability of being able to deliver what you want, but not necessarily the most expensive people.
Correct.
Thank you, Ajay, for speaking to me about your incredible journey. Thank you for talking to me about what went into building HCL into what it is today. And it is one of the 2 or 3 top companies from India. Thank you also for talking to me about your dream. And you articulated it so well. I'm sure my viewers and listeners would love every single point you made about making India into a powerful electronics product nation. And finally, thank you for speaking to me of the EPIC Foundation and all the amazing work that you're doing. Thank you again and good luck.
Thank you, Ashutosh. It was great talking to you.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.